Recently, there's been a lot of controversy about horse meat sold as beef in Europe. I'm joined by CAS Professor Sodhi, who specialises in supply chain risk, to discuss this issue and supply chain risk more generally. So first of all, do you think these long global supply chains will increase or decrease as a result of this kind of crisis?
It may seem right now that because of such crises like the horse meat crisis and the long global chains sprawling all over the globe, it should decrease. But no, I think global supply chains will continue becoming more and more global. For instance, recently we had the EU talking to the US about having a common trade zone. So then global supply chains for beef might get even longer.
So what are the implications for supply chain risk?
Well, as supply chains get longer and longer, we have less visibility into what we are actually getting, so the risk increases. Secondly, things may fail anywhere in the supply chain, disruptions can occur, so the product finally reaching the customer becomes more risky. Of course, supply chains will have to find solutions by way of, for example, supply chain insurance, and insurance companies are working towards creating supply chain insurance products for companies. But it'll take time because supply chains are growing global faster than we are coming up with solutions for risk.
So obviously here at CAS we're in the city. What about the monetary context for this conversation? Are banks helping or hindering?
Supply chains do consist of three things: the flow of materials, the flow of information, and the flow of cash. And certainly the flow of cash, banks can help or hinder. We saw in the financial crisis that the crisis created by banks actually disrupted supply chains and manufacturers went out of business. So in that sense, banks can play a role which is quite damaging and adds to supply chain risk. Now we see other companies coming up with new business models to help facilitate finance in the supply chain by way of what we call a supply chain finance. But it is amazing to see that the banks have not been innovative in spotting opportunities to make money for themselves as well as for companies in the supply chains.
So the city and big bonuses lead to the question of the growing divide between rich and poor. How can global supply chains help or hinder with that?
Supply chains create more wealth. Now, how you divide up the wealth between a customer and a supplier, or between a supplier and their supplier and so on, that's not really a supply chain issue, it's a power issue. Certainly, we've seen social enterprise coming up with new ways of creating supply chains that help create more wealth for people who we might call as the bottom of the pyramid. So supply chain in that sense can play a very important role in making money for the very poor. But in general, this is something the large companies have to come up with, ideas for doing social business where they make money, but they also ensure that the poorest in the society also make money. Eventually, the question of equitability is not a supply chain issue.
So going back to beef and horse meat, do you have any thoughts specifically about the issue or food in general that you want to share with us?
In general, we expect supply chains to get longer, and so the beef supply chain being so long for beef lasagna is hardly surprising. What strikes me the most when it comes to food here is this issue of what I call as plausible deniability, where you have the large retailers, Tesco or Aldi and other companies, saying we have no idea what we are selling you. And they are able to do that because they say we accept what our suppliers is selling us. But they are selling it as their product, and the customers are buying it because it's Tesco or Aldi or whoever. So I find this deniability quite amazing.